Welcome back to the 108th online episode of Peacetime, hosted on Sunday mornings in the name of Peace Point, with myself, Phra Nicholas Thanissaro, coming to you today from DMCCA in Azusa, California. In the most recent Illuminated Texts episode, we looked at the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, and today we continue on our anthology of important suttas from the Buddhist scriptures by looking at number 16 of our Illuminated Text series called the Gaṇaka-Moggallāna Sutta, which outlines the training system for Buddhist monks. I estimate today's session will run to about an hour and a quarter with a 30-minute break halfway through for some meditation. So as usual with our chosen sutta, we will work our way through the sequence of sources, sutta-name-meaning, interlocutors, place names and background before looking at the main body of the manuscript itself and finishing up with some of the issues the sutta raises. So the sutta we'll be studying today is referenced as the 107th sutta of the middle-length discourses of the Buddha, or Majjhima Nikaya. It is referenced in Western scholarship as M3 page 1 onwards, or MN 107. Today the translation manuscript I'll make use of is Maurice Walsh's Wisdom Publications edition of the middle-length discourses of the Buddha. So the main interlocutor in this sutta is a mathematician called Moggallāna. So although he is Moggallāna, he is distinct from Maha-Moggallāna, who was the chief left-hand disciple of the Buddha. By contrast, this guy was a layman named Moggallāna, who was a mathematician or perhaps an accountant, who had a way of teaching his students step by step, starting from teaching them to count, to add, to subtract, to multiply, to divide, before going into more detail. And it was because this mathematician trained his students sequentially like this that he became one of the most famous math teachers in the Indian subcontinent at the time. All the aspiring mathematicians were sent to study with him. At the beginning of the sutta, Gaṇaka-Moggallāna's respect for the Buddha was not profound, as shown by the way he addressed the Buddha, calling him by his surname, as we see in the second last line of the slide, instead of by an honorific. Normally, it would be the Indian custom of the time to refer to spiritual teachers more respectfully, so he started out as something of a skeptic. The only other interlocutor in this sutta is the Buddha himself, who is identified by the epithet of the Blessed One in this translation. So the sutta's full name, the Gaṇaka-Moggallāna Sutta, means the discourse to Gaṇaka-Moggallāna. Teaching took place in Savatthi in the eastern park or Pubbarama in the palace of Mighara-mata, or Mighara's mother. So it was a building sponsored in that temple by Lady Visakha when she mislaid her very valuable Mahaladapasatana, or full-body jeweled ornament, in that temple, and instead of accepting it back when it was found, bought it back with 9 crores of her own money, and this money was used to build the palace that was thereafter known as Mighara-matu-pasatha. So the overview for this sutta is that Gaṇaka-Moggallāna asked if the Buddha had a method to teach his disciples. The Buddha outlined the sequential method he used for monastic training, with the sutta elaborating on his answer. And the structure of the sequence outlined by the Buddha is the threefold training of the Sila, Samadhi, Paññā, with which we are already familiar. If you need a reminder, you can look back at IPE 6 and IPE 7. However, in the way it is applied to monastic training here, it deals with a wider range of issues. Morality, or Sila, is divided in this sutta into 2 subheadings of physical training and social training. Physical training means the training of the body and restraint of the senses. Social training refers to the upholding of the 227 patimokkha rules, the manners of a monk, and the training of monastic habits. As for training in meditation, this would include training in both mindfulness and meditation. Put in sequence, Monks would start with restraint according to the monastic precepts, before continuing with restraint of the sense doors, moderation in eating, continuous awareness, mindfulness and clear comprehension, seeking solitude and overcoming the 5 hindrances, and finally attaining the absorptions. So in the Gaṇaka-Moggallāna Sutta, the Buddha provided a training scheme for monks which he called gradual or sequential, starting with simple things and moving on in 7 steps to more challenging ones. So in starting to explain the system to Gaṇaka-Moggallāna, the Buddha uses the metaphor initially of the training of a wild horse. So what we see in paragraph 3 is, it is possible, Brahmin, to describe gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress in this Dhamma and discipline. Just as, Brahmin, when a clever horse trainer obtains a fine thoroughbred colt, he first gets him used to wearing the bit, and afterwards trains him further. So the received wisdom, at least from WikiHow, on taming a maverick, is that its training needs to follow a clear sequence. It seems that you get started by tailoring your training method to your riding interests, you let the horse be around other tamed horses, you earn the horse's trust by going slowly, you let the horse get used to your touch, you learn to groom the horse properly. You continue by lunging the horse, putting on the halter without a bit, and walk the horse around the pasture. You prepare to ride, now using a bridle and bit. You saddle the horse, and from there you can learn to read your horse, its physical and emotional status. And finally, you shouldn't expect too much from your first ride. Then moving on to the latter part of paragraph 3, we see the Buddha introducing the equivalent training for a new monk with the invitation, "Come monks, be virtuous, with restraint according to the patimokkha, be perfect in conduct and resort, and caution for the slightest fault. Training by undertaking the monastic precepts." So here we are introduced to the technical term patimokkha-samvara, which refers to the 227 monastic rules. When someone ordains, the preceptor doesn't know their background, especially those who have come from a different country, another religious background, or from a different upbringing. The newcomer may basically know nothing about the teaching of the Buddha. So the first thing the Buddha said the newly ordained monk must do is to learn about the precepts, the basic 227 precepts, and also about manners, good habits, and being a harmless person. So a monk must train themselves physically and verbally. No matter how they behaved in the past before they ordained, they must be better going forward. But having become a monk, the first thing they have to do is behave like a good monk. So, following the precepts closely because it is very important for making a fresh start. So, throughout the training, the monks must maintain their precepts strictly as a foundation to higher levels of spiritual development, meditation and wisdom. So the first thing in which the Buddha said monks must train themselves is to uphold the precepts. If this were the Samaññaphala Sutta, at this point the Buddha would bring in mention of the haunts, seeing danger in small things, right livelihood, and endowment with self-discipline on the level of Jula Sila, Majjhima Sila, and Mahasila. But in the Gaṇaka-Moggallāna Sutta, this part of the training is only mentioned in brief. But as we see in paragraph 4 with the words, "Come, bhikkhu, guard the doors of your sense faculties. On seeing a form with the eye, do not grasp at its signs and features, since if you were to leave the eye faculty unguarded, evil, unwholesome states of covetousness and grief might invade you. Practice the way of its restraint, guard the eye faculty, undertake the restraint of the eye faculty, before continuing with the other sense channels." So here the Buddha is moving on to the second stage of training with restraint of the senses. Often sense stimuli can be like baited hooks, which have been cast into the water. Like a fish, we can get hooked very easily. In fact, no one forces fish to bite. It's up to the fish whether they bite or not. But if the hook is tempting enough, then the fish can hardly resist. Once they take a bite, they can't get free of the hook anymore. With the senses, it's much the same. We have a total of 6 senses, 5 directed towards the outside, and a 6th, which is our mental faculty. To develop the mental faculty, we must withdraw from the 5 external senses. So when we are talking about restraint of the senses, it means reducing the attachments we have for the sensual. And for Buddhist monks, this is particularly important, and which justifies monks leading frugal lives and avoiding indulgence in the external senses to get more chance to learn about the mind. So controlling the sense doors is the second step, more of a challenge than keeping the precepts. And moving on to paragraph number 5, we come to the third step of the monastic training, which is moderation in eating. This training is special to this sutta and not mentioned in the Samaññaphala Sutta. Eating is very important. Hunger is an incurable disease for all of us from the cradle to the grave. Even if we've just eaten a huge meal, within 6 hours we'll get hungry again. But the training comes in knowing how much to eat for it not to be excessive. In other words, moderation in eating. The Buddha specifically said, the purpose of eating is neither for amusement, nor for intoxication, nor for the sake of physical beauty and attractiveness, but only for the endurance and continuance of this body, for ending discomfort, and for assisting the holy life, considering, thus I shall terminate old feelings without arising new feelings, and I shall be healthy and blameless, and shall live in comfort. Some people just enjoy eating whatever they want for the physical beauty or attractiveness. To get bright, radiant skin, they might eat certain kinds of supplements or vitamins to help them look younger. For monks at least, a more sensible objective for eating is merely to maintain enough energy to carry on the training and minimize the distraction from being hungry. So we need to have the right amount of food and nutrition for our physical body to endure in cultivating our good deeds and staying healthy, so that our physical body can be a vehicle for higher meditation and wisdom. If you are a monk or on 8 precepts, you are only allowed to eat 2 meals a day. After lunch, the only things allowed are either fruit juice or dairy products. In the evening, we may feel a little bit hungry, but with a small quantity of refreshment, we can still have a good meditation in the evening too. However, if you eat too much with a heavy meal in the evening, we cannot meditate very well because the body is so weighed down. So, this is the origin of the advice in the Theragatha and the Visuddhimagga that we should stop eating 4 mouthfuls before we are full. This same sort of moderation in consumption would apply to the consumption of all the 4 basic monastic requisites. Moving on to paragraph 6, we get to start working directly with the mind by practicing continuous awareness, which is also unique to the Gaṇaka-Moggallāna Sutta. The Buddha said, and I quote from paragraph 6, "Be devoted to wakefulness during the day while walking back and forth and sitting. Purify your mind of obstructive states." It's a practice of watchfulness, wakefulness, or vigilance. It's important to know where your mind is from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed. To know where your mind is when you do laundry, when you complete chores, or even when you visit the restroom. If you know where your mind is throughout the day, basically you cannot be distracted. Buddha intended that we pay attention to our internal state or emotion. At the beginning, the mind will still wander the whole time, and although we might try to control the mind, it will still wander constantly, because that's the nature of the mind. But if we continue working with the mind over the weeks or months, later we'll find it easier to keep the mind centered throughout the day. So moving on to paragraph 7, we see the 5th step in the monastic training, which is also shared with the Samaññaphala Sutta, which is training in mindfulness and clear comprehension, in Pali Sati Sampajañña. Mindfulness means being 100% conscious of what you do. So in this paragraph, we see the Buddha telling the monks to cultivate mindfulness and clear comprehension by acting in full awareness when going forward and returning, when looking ahead and looking away, when flexing and extending your limbs, when wearing your robes and carrying your outer robe and bowl, when eating, drinking, consuming food, and tasting, when using the restroom, when walking, standing, sitting, falling asleep, waking up, talking, keeping silent. In real life, mindfulness is learning moderation in the use of the 4 requisites. For example, recognizing moderation in eating. It would also refer to keeping the mind at the center of the body 24 hours a day, even in between the meditation sessions and while doing other tasks. As for self-possession, it would refer to the development of continuous awareness, especially awareness of what is of benefit, what is appropriate, awareness of the nature of implicit happiness, and protecting oneself against gullibility. At this point, the Samaññaphala Sutta would move into the territory of the fruits of true monkhood on the intermediate level and would insert contentment at this point, but in the Gaṇaka-Moggallāna Sutta, which is more abbreviated, the training proceeds straight to the sixth step, which is solitude. So in paragraph 8, the Buddha mentions that at this stage monks need to seek out seclusion for practice. So we see the Buddha recommending a secluded resting place, the forest, the root of a tree, a mountain, a ravine, a hillside cave, a charnel ground, a jungle thicket, an open space, or a heap of straw. He recommends that monks need a solitude to focus fully on their meditation practice without interruption. At this point, and this training is also found in the Samaññaphala Sutta, the monk overcomes the 5 hindrances, and you can look back at my session A007 if you need to know the specific antidotes to each one of the hindrances, whether it be sense desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, absent-mindedness, or doubt. Once a practitioner can get rid of these hindrances, their mind will become unified and be able to enter upon higher states of meditation. And in paragraph 10, we see the 7th and final stage of training, once the mind is broken free of the 5 hindrances, which is called attaining the absorptions, or jhana, where the practitioner's mind is completely unified. In this sutta, a more abbreviated description is given than is found in the Samaññaphala Sutta. And incidentally, from this stage onwards, monastic practice enters upon what would technically be known as vipassana. So at this climactic point in our sutta, it turns out that we have come about halfway. So, having reached mention of the absorptions, before we continue with the remainder of the sutta, perhaps it is a good juncture to settle ourselves for 30 minutes of meditation, which today is entitled Inner Sanctuary. If at this time you would like to find a comfortable sitting position for yourself as you listen to my guidance. So before closing our eyes, let's take a moment to relax all our muscles and adopt a comfortable sitting position, slowly bringing our attention back to ourselves, becoming aware of our surroundings, registering the way we're feeling as we adjust our posture, taking our time to readjust until we feel comfortable, almost like taking a vacation after a very long week, allowing ourselves just to rest and completely free our mind. We might bring our attention back to our physical posture, observing the feeling of the floor beneath us, adjusting our body, especially our legs, until there's no stress or strain around our calves, our knees, or our thighs, until we have good circulation. Moving on to relax our hands, making sure they're placed only very gently in our lap, without any tension around our elbows or our shoulders, especially adjusting our back and our neck to be straight and upright, without any tension in the lower back, and taking our time to observe all the way from the top of our head, right the way down to the tips of our toes, to make sure we're comfortable, that our posture is natural, so that we feel that we can release any tension in our body with no resistance, no struggle, and getting our posture completely comfortable. Then we can turn our attention to becoming aware of our breath, the way we breathe in and out, feeling the in-breath moving gently down to the turning point deep inside us, before exhaling very gently, observing deeply the gentle contact of our breath inside us. And as we breathe out, we may allow our mind to let go of all worries, resentment, or any other sort of negativity pent up inside. And as the breath refreshes us from the inside, we may feel that it makes a turn at the center point, at the place where it turns between the in-breath and the out-breath. And as we exhale, we allow the mind to relieve itself of all preoccupation, and we don't need to be concerned with anything beyond ourselves. We feel okay with whatever experience arises for us. If we haven't done so already, we can allow our eyes to close very gently, without any tension, at the corners of our eyes or across our eyeballs, feeling the relaxation spread from our eyes to our forehead, down through our temples, nose, cheeks, relaxing all our facial muscles, down through our neck, our shoulders, and our arms, relaxing the whole of our torso, both legs, down to our feet and our toes. So relaxing every muscle in our body, especially in our face, around our eyes, allowing our facial muscles to become soft, and allowing our attention to return to the present moment. The more our body becomes relaxed, the easier it will become for us to withdraw from the physical senses, from any distractions around us, so the mind can reach deeper within, allowing us to free up the mind, allowing it to let go of physical matters. So we take our time to relax, relaxing every last joint in our body. And anytime we realize that we are being distracted by our thoughts or anything else, we can just return to relaxation of the body and reminding ourselves that this is our time to rest, while coming back repeatedly to our mindfulness, each time our state of mind becoming more profound and stable, taking our time to allow the attention just to be within ourselves until we almost feel the sense of silence coming from within us. The sense of silence that we have within, the feeling of our body, the sense of comfort that it creates for us, as if our whole body and mind is enwrapped in a sense of peace, until we feel that we are truly alone, but without feeling lonely, in a place where we don't need to respond to the demands of the outside world. But at the same time, our mental state is broader and wider than before, expanding outwards to the very horizons around us, a space within which we can let go of any responsibilities, anything that has been bothering us, allowing us to access a greater sense of inner space, with an accompanying sense of relief and freedom. If there are any thoughts that come up in the mind or distractions, we treat them as something far away in the distance, because in the foreground of our mind Instead, we have a sense of peace and comfort. We might even picture ourselves transported to a picturesque landscape where the horizon is far away, as if we were on the coastline. We are relieved to settle down within this self-created space with a mind free of all distractions, the same space that shares the breath that goes deep down into our body, observing the flow of the breath while occupying our self-created space as an inner sanctuary, so that our whole awareness feels buoyant and light, like a balloon ready to fly away, weightless in the atmosphere. And when our mind is ready, we can allow it to settle gently within our inner sanctuary, bringing our awareness, our attention, down to a place where we sense inner comfort within the space of the body, perhaps at the point where the breath turns between the in-breath and the out-breath, or any other place that feels more comfortable for us. Allowing our mind or our attention to rest here with a sense of softness and comfort, as if it has just returned after a long absence or after a long journey. By returning to this point, it's a place where it can really take its rest. If we find we're distracted at all, we can just bring our attention back again each time, observing from the perspective of comfort within the body, filling our inner space until we're able to return again. And there's really nothing that we have to do. As long as we find ourselves feeling content, then we're on the right path. And with each moment we become a little bit closer to that sense of inner peace, which is the most natural state of our mind, a state where the mind is completely disengaged from other matters and released from its normal burdens, remaining within our center space with a sense of comfort and contentment. If we require more structure to our practice, we can use any of the normal helpers, such as a visualized image at the center of ourselves, where we imagine bright radiance within ourselves, reminding ourselves that it doesn't need to be clear or sharp in the mind, but more like a gentle or curious recognition of an inner sensation, a presence that is warm and bright, radiating outward until our awareness is so still that although the image may disappear, but the awareness stays the same, simply observing within us. Some people may make use of a mantra if it seems helpful, as if the sound of the mantra resonates from deep inside us, almost like a continuous music in the mind. Any words or affirmations to keep us in touch with that centeredness inside of ourselves. A sound that is soothing, comforting, almost like a lullaby in the mind, which can bring our awareness to complete stillness, at which point the sound will fade down into silence, and our only remaining task will be to remain with that inner sense of comfort. And as long as the sense of contentment is still there, it will gradually magnify and multiply into a sense of joy or bliss or happiness, and the extent of the peace will accumulate more and more. When we feel lost, it will be a place to which we can turn inward and can be our guide, our source of courage and sanctuary from the world. We let it shine through, even if it's not perfect, but boldly because its glow leads us to ever greater inner light. Because even when, like the light of the candle, it may flicker, it never goes out, continuing to withstand the wind and the shadows, not with harshness, but with gentleness. For its strength lies not in its size, but in its unshakable nature. So we continue in this way very lightly, keeping our mind gently on track by our chosen technique, just for a few more moments in silence, until we come to time for some loving kindness meditation. So we continue to keep our awareness on track at the most comfortable place within ourselves, allowing the mind to return to its own inner sanctuary, which we'll find is of the nature of peace and tranquility. This inner experience is like a silent glow that never goes out, no matter how dark the world may seem. It is the warmth within our heart, the spark in our inner being, the kernel of our dreams, when everything else feels dark. It is an inner fire we carry around with us, an inward flicker of hope. And as our awareness becomes better focused, we find that peacefulness magnifies and multiplies into a sense of loving kindness and compassion, which brings a sense of joy and happiness, which radiates outward with compassion for all within its radius, allowing us to share this sense of positivity and use the full capacity of the mind to reach outward with positive emotions, almost like the sun shining its rays ever outward, wider, initially throughout the whole of our body, with the wish that we may be well and happy, free from all suffering, gaining a clear path in life towards good and better things, and radiating a sense of positivity to the world. And beyond ourselves, we can extend a sense of positive intent for every person, every living being, to live joyfully, free of pain, free of sadness, and full of peace. Just as a candle that does not shine for itself, but shines for others, for those who walk in darkness, who have lost their way, who are looking for a sign not to give up. Deep into others' hearts and minds, we allow that sense of loving kindness to extend ever outward from our center, like the sunlight that reaches into every dark corner across the whole globe, sharing a sense of peace and loving kindness to all living beings without exception, since it is something that others need from us, even if we don't realize it ourselves, because the glow of our inner loving kindness is more than just light. It is comfort, it is hope, and a silent promise that those others are not alone. So we continue to extend this inner glow for ourselves, for others, for a world that sometimes needs more light than it's able to receive. Or we can extend loving kindness in addition toward those for whom we feel a particular debt of gratitude in life, towards those who have helped us, those still living, or those who have already passed, trusting that our positive intentions can extend across the gulfs of space and time to reach those important others wherever they are to be found, to bring them uplift in body and mind through the shared positivity of our loving kindness. So we continue our loving kindness practice in this way, just for a few more moments in silence, until we come to the appropriate time. Sappha Buddhanupavena, Sappha Dhammanupavena, Sappha Saṅkhanupavena Sattha Soti Bhavantu Te. So if you'd like to come to the end of your meditation for today, you can gradually open your eyes again. If you feel at all uncomfortable, then slowly try changing to a more comfortable position before gently finishing your practice. So the sutta we started to look at before our meditation today could be referred to as a map or a framework for monastic training. As the Buddha puts it in paragraph 11, "This is my instruction, Brahmin, to those bhikkhus who are in the higher training, whose minds have not yet attained the goal." In retrospective, the process consists of 3 stages. The physical part is about steps 1 to 3 of the Gaṇaka-Moggallāna Sutta, so about morality, restraint of the sense doors, and moderation in eating. So these 3 steps prepare the physical body for mental development. The second stage, consisting of steps 4 through 6 of the Gaṇaka-Moggallāna Sutta, is to do with mental development, so continuous awareness, mindfulness, and clear comprehension, and seeking out solitude to overcome the 5 hindrances. The third stage, which corresponds to the 7th step in the Gaṇaka-Moggallāna Sutta, is the attainment of the absorptions or jhana, beyond which a monk starts to gain insight and corresponds with the 3rd stage of wisdom development. So this is a map or a framework which practitioners can follow. So what we see in paragraph 12 is that Gaṇaka-Moggallāna asked the Buddha whether all monks following this training curriculum managed to attain nirvana, with the words, "When Master Gotama's disciples are thus advised and instructed by him, do they all attain nirvana, the ultimate goal, or do some not attain it?" The Buddha admits with the words, "When, Brahmin, they are thus advised and instructed by me, some of my disciples attain nirvana, the ultimate goal, but some do not attain it." In other words, even with all this advice, some monks reach nirvana, while others fail to do so. So, turning to paragraph 13, we see Gaṇaka-Moggallāna asking the Buddha why some monks who follow the Buddha's teaching realize nirvana while others do not. And what was the Buddha's reply? So what we see is the Buddha giving a metaphor of people who are shown the correct route to the city of Rajagaha. Some people, although given correct directions, make it all the way to their destination, while others go along in the right direction for a while, but then take the wrong turning and do not reach their destination. So the Buddha's directions were correct, but the implementation was wrong, so they never make it to Rajagaha. In the same way, the Buddha said that he has correctly pointed out the path to nirvana, but not all disciples manage to follow the route in its entirety, so some end up not reaching nirvana. And what we see explained in paragraph 15 is that one of the reasons the Buddha gives for ordained monks failing to reach nirvana is that they do not have pure motivation. He claims that they ordain not out of faith, but seeking a livelihood, who are fraudulent, deceitful, treacherous, haughty, hollow, personally vain, rough-tongued, loose-spoken, unguarded in their sense faculties, immoderate in eating, undevoted to wakefulness, unconcerned with recluseship, not greatly respectful of training, luxurious, careless, leaders in backsliding, neglectful of seclusion, lazy, wanting in energy, unmindful, not fully aware, unconcentrated, with straying minds, devoid of wisdom, drivellers. So basically there are 2 reasons monks don't make it to the final destination of nirvana. One is because they misinterpret the Buddha's instructions and take a wrong turning, and the other is because the monks have not taken ordination with the proper aim in life. So turning to paragraph 16, we see the outcome of the sutta. Gaṇaka-Moggallāna praises the Buddha's teaching as being precious and without compare, likening it to the black orris, which is the best of the root perfumes, or red sandalwood, which is the best of wood perfumes, or jasmine, which is the best of flower perfumes. In the same way, Master Gotama's advice is supreme among the teachings of today. Then, turning to the final paragraph 17, as we see, Gaṇaka-Moggallāna further praises the Buddha's teaching according to the standard formula, and takes refuge in the Buddha for the rest of his life. So that was the Gaṇaka-Moggallāna Sutta, one of the best brief overviews of the sequence of monastic training that you can find in the Buddhist scriptures. From what I can tell, there are about 4 outstanding issues arising from the sutta which might need a little bit of extra explanation. Namely, the way the Buddha sees his role as a guide, the actual availability of monastic training curricula, comparison with the scheme of the Samaññaphala Sutta, and the importance of proper motivation for monastic training. So starting with the first of these points, in this sutta the Buddha is pretty clear in portraying himself as being nothing more than a guide on the spiritual path of training, rather than doing the work for the practitioner. It's like the proverb, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. The Buddha cannot make the spiritual journey on our behalf. We have to do the walking for ourselves. So if we get distracted along the way and never reach our destination, we can't blame the Buddha. It's up to each of us to do it for ourselves. The Buddha merely testifies that nirvana exists and that there's a clear path to get us there. But while some reach nirvana, others don't. The monks that don't reach their destination are generally those who are boastful, devious, cunning, conceited, arrogant, fickle-minded, loose in their speech, unrestrained as to the senses, and who neglect striving or are insufficiently strict in their precepts. Conversely, faithful young men who renounce the household life, who are not boastful, cunning, distracted, arrogant, indecisive, or talkative, and who uphold the precepts, strive diligently, seek out solitude, and follow through on their mindfulness and wisdom, will reach enlightenment. So we must ask ourselves which category we belong to. So if a monk is not really endowed with faith, why did they ordain in the first place? If their faith is fickle, like a turtle's head, that ducks inside the shell at the first sign of hardship, if they wake up in the morning with a mind full of faith and the intention to meditate and study the Tipitaka, but when they come face to face with sleepiness, hunger, distraction, and lazy companions, they lose their motivation to uphold the precepts, study, and expend effort. Consequently, they only go through the motions of keeping the precepts, avoiding solitude, dealing in amulets and superstitious paraphernalia, and are only interested in accumulating monetary donations. So this is why the Buddha said the monks may be physically close to him, but they remain distant if they fail to be earnest in following his spiritual path. So not all monks can expect to succeed in their training like the 4 types of lotuses. The monk who allows themselves to get waylaid from their training will not reach enlightenment. It is the equivalent of the lotus under the mud, or the untrainable horse which can only be sent to the glue factory. So we come to the second point, which is comparison of the theory of monastic training with the actual monastic training offered to monks in Asian countries. You would think with the abundant clarity available on the subject of training monks, it would form a clear basis for the training curriculum for monks and novices. In Thailand, the reality, though, is that most effort is put into theoretical forms of training. The official syllabus is the 3-level Dhamma studies curriculum, or in Thai, Nak Tham, from elementary, intermediate, and advanced levels. The other syllabus is the 9-grade Pali studies curriculum, which is basically just translating from scriptural languages. These are all theoretical forms of knowledge rather than the more hands-on training of putting the theory into practice. Apart from academic knowledge, monks take up a lot of time with temple administration, which I guess you could say is learning to apply knowledge obtained from studying the Tipitaka. Training up a younger generation of monks, laymen and laywomen to be a team of perpetuators of the religion and to build a temple is definitely a challenge that requires monks to exemplify and explain the good habits that they've mastered. Ironically, not all monks in all temples meditate, but this would be a mistake according to the teachings of the Gaṇaka-Moggallāna Sutta. In the modern day, monks have to juggle their time between theoretical study, making the time to train their own habits, administering and often constructing the temple they live in, and training monks and laypeople. And although it's quite a time management challenge, monks can succeed if they modernize their understanding of self-training a little bit, so a bit like the SODOTO, see one, do one, teach one principle of the American College of Surgeons. What I think is important for monks is to realize that you have to go beyond the theory and scriptural language studies that are assumed to be the mainstay of the official monastic curriculum, and make sure meditation and self-training are part of your monastic routine. So at various points in my exegesis today, I have compared the Gaṇaka-Moggallāna Sutta to the Samaññaphala Sutta, which we already studied in B054. It is true that the most comprehensive overview of sequential monastic training needs to be sourced from several places in the Buddhist scriptures. The Digha Nikaya Samaññaphala Sutta is generally considered to be the most complete account of the sequential monastic training recommended by the Buddha. For example, the Samaññaphala Sutta has sections on ordination with an aim in mind, conducts and haunts, seeing danger in small things, right livelihood, endowment with self-discipline on the short, middle, and large levels, and contentment. Nonetheless, there are some parts of the monastic training that are expanded upon in more detail in the Gaṇaka-Moggallāna Sutta than they are in the Samaññaphala Sutta. This is particularly the case for moderation in eating and continuous awareness. Bear in mind, though, that if you are a monastic training completist, that there are other sources besides the Gaṇaka-Moggallāna Sutta and the Samaññaphala Sutta that provide further information beyond these two suttas, particularly the 5 dangers for a new monk, the Parisutti Sila of the Sila Nitesa, and the 3 factors of the Apannaka Patipattha. Actually, these sources do not contradict each other. Like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, they combine with one another, and study of the resulting compilation gives us the most comprehensive overview of monastic practice. Lastly, apart from saying that substandard motivation will not get a monk to their destination, this particular sutta doesn't really go into as much detail concerning ordination with an aim in mind as the Samaññaphala Sutta, where more detail is given on seeing the danger of the household life, or seeing the household life as a narrow and dusty path. Nonetheless, knowing that the Buddha can only be a guide, it is important to examine one's basic motivation for ordination and being cautious about the dangers of the lay life. Motivation alone or rejection of the lay life is not enough on its own to get a monk to nirvana. The Buddha reiterates that the lay life is narrow, which does not refer merely to homes generally being cramped, because even if you live in a palace, it is still considered narrow. All a person's bandwidth is taken up by the needs of their children, wives, husbands, and ruthless competition for limited wealth. Secondly, the Buddha reiterated that the lay life is the source of dust, by which he meant defilements. Therefore, how can we escape from these things to enjoy more secure happiness? Permanent escape involves attainment of nirvana, because we have put suffering behind us completely. This is what the Buddha has emphasized since time immemorial, right down to our own generation. In the verses monks repeat on their day of ordination, using the words Nibbana Satchikaranataya, which means striving to attain nirvana, to conquer all the defilements, rather than adopting a more superficial motivation. Along the way, monks need to let go of things like conceit, pride, ego, and dogmatic beliefs, while establishing themselves in a moral life to ensure their own safe destiny by attaining the Dhammakaya, and with a view to perpetuate Buddhism for the future. Even if we don't decide to become a monk, we should try to avoid being hoodwinked by the illusion of profundity in the household life, and be cautious of the ease with which we can pick up defilements in life by being strict in our precepts, while also making sure we do not get waylaid from the goal of the spiritual path. So today we have been looking at the Gaṇaka-Moggallāna Sutta. My next Buddhist offering will be a quick introduction to the Abhidhamma. So for good measure, I'd like to remind viewers to keep the questions coming in about meditation or topics that you've learned in the lecture to the email address you can see spelled out in the slide, and I'll do my best to answer these on my next session. In the meantime, try to avoid recklessness or complacency, maintain a positive mood, speak only positive words, forgive others, extend good wishes to others, and meditate daily. Hopefully, as a result of today's session, you will be inspired to follow through on all 7 steps of spiritual training outlined in the Gaṇaka-Moggallāna Sutta. So that's all for today. Thanks for viewing. So long, folks, and stay safe.